There's just this hunger to talk and to be acknowledged, and so I just want to thank you for that and ask you a question about language and the normalization of violence, particularly, you know, my sweet spot is young women and creating a safe space for them. And, you know, I get annoyed by language that is sexist. Like I get annoyed when people address a group of people by guys. How you guys doing? It just makes me just a little uncomfortable. Right. And often women will do that with a group of only women. You know, so there are little things like that. But then, you know, we watched in our hip hop generation a tank top become a wife beater, and that disturbed me deeply. Not like, why are you calling me a guy, but like this, and the normalization of women being violent against each other, from, you know, fighting for the ugliest rapper in the game to, you know, it got very normal for violence. And how do we, particularly language as a writer, aside from, like, I don't let people say that word to me, and I worked in fashion, so I heard it all the time. I'm like, I don't use that word, please don't use that word.
So white beater?
White beater. I was like, that's a tank top. Right. And before that, it had another, you know, name, a guinea tee, which is basically calling it a nigga shirt, you know, for Italian people. But what's disturbing is how many young women go, I'm gonna wear my jeans and a wife beater. And how do you reconcile it? I mean, besides just, as I said, and often when talking to young women, when I make them, they're not even aware that they're saying a wife beater. Do you know how many women are being beat right now as you are wearing this shirt? And that there's no male equivalent to that. Right. There's nothing in male vocabulary that is the equivalent of calling someone a bitch or a hoe, like, or there's no way that you address a whole group of men and go, how you gals doing? How you gals out there? You know? So I feel like these are these subtle, insidious ways in which we are abused and or marginalized. And how do we start to kind of dismantle the normalcy? Particularly because I feel with younger people, they have more time to sort of heal, you know, and get to healing earlier, you know, so we stop this legacy of violence. And the normalcy with young people and violence and violent language and violent vocabulary. It's not just for the basketball court. It's like you're calling your friend a hoe. I was with that hoe the other day. Like that's. You know, they use that, it's like, cool, it's weird. And I'm not, I mean, I don't want to be clutching my pearls like, oh God. But white beater that's specific, that's not, I don't know. So,
I think you do know though. I think I mean, it's interesting, it's coming from, you have your handheld device, and you talk about Facebook. I think that those of us who are in tune, like you are, with young people and popular culture, we've got to be right there on the front lines challenging at every turn, you know. I think that's how you do it. A lot of times when I do workshops, I know you work with young women, a lot of times I do stuff with young males, you know, by the time the conversation or workshop is over, we're rethinking the use of the N-word. I can tell you that for a fact. Like, you know, this is unacceptable. I mean, I tell you, I hate it when I hear it all over the basketball courts, all everywhere I play, it's everywhere. I'm like, when did we become NIGGAs, or however you want to spell it? It's still, you know, it's destructive to me. But I think, you know, we've got to do it in a way that's loving, and I think that folks like us, because you have a daughter who's a teenager, so you understand the language of teenagers because you have one. I think it's got to be folks who are going to come to young people in a way that's not like condemning, but at the same time, hey, there's another way to go here. You know, I do think that there's been a real serious dumbing down of our society in the last 15, 20, 25 years, where anything goes now. And I think, you know, think about it, those of us who are in Generation X, you know, 35, early 40 something, whatever age range we're on, it's hard to keep up with these generational things at this point. But we grew up in a world with 8 or 9 TV channels. Now, 500 channels. Handheld devices, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I mean, there's so many different things that they're being bombarded with, and I just think that it really, it stops the process of critical thinking. It's kind of reduced to a text message, you know, and easy vocabulary, wife beater, the N word, the B word, etc. And I think those of us who have, I really think our generation is interesting because we're not the baby boomers or the civil rights generation, and so we're still young enough to relate to them, but we have the traditions and the cultural history that we know that we've got to pass on. We're almost like the bridge generation at this point. And we also grew up on popular culture, on MTV, BT, hip hop, all that kind of stuff. And I just think we got a challenge. We got a challenge at every turn. And I think, I know Michaela does it, Quinn does it. Anyone out there, you all should, you know, if you feel you have something to give to younger people, volunteer to go to a school, a high school, a grade school, at least once a month. I try to go once a week in Brooklyn, you know, and actually engage young people. And don't leave it to the teachers to do it by themselves, because we all have to be teachers. Everyone in this room has something to offer. But I think particularly if you're a person who has no knowledge of the things that Michaela's talking about, I think you have to do it. And I think if you're a friend, if your children have friends, you got to assume that they're friends of your children too. They may not be getting it in their household, you know. But you just made me say I'm never going to say guys again. You know, and here I am just gave a speech about inequality. You're right, guys. I don't use white people. That's terrible.
Right.
You know.
Guys is more subtle, but I think what you said something very that I think about all the time is being loving and not condemning, because also young people are just told they're wrong all the time, and if they knew better, they would do better. And so I think that's really important in terms of checking. But we gotta check each other too, like whack, you know, but in a loving way.